Bullies smeared peanut butter on his chair. He destroyed them in the ring. Wesley Hammond arrived at Ridgemont High School on a Tuesday morning in late September when the leaves were just beginning to turn and the air still carried the ghost of summer warmth. He was 17 and looked younger, with a slight frame that made his second-hand jacket hang loose around his shoulders and wire-rimmed glasses that kept sliding down his nose. His dark hair fell over his eyes in a way that suggested he was trying to disappear behind it. He walked with his head down, backpack straps clutched in both hands, navigating the crowded hallway like someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. The school itself was typical for suburban Colorado, a sprawling single-story complex of brick and concrete built in the 1980s with additions tacked on over the decades. Long corridors lined with dented lockers stretched between wings, named after forgotten benefactors. The main hallway connected the academic wing to the gymnasium and cafeteria, and this stretch of polished linoleum became the stage where social hierarchies were performed and reinforced every day between classes. Wesley had transferred in from a smaller school district after his mother took a new job managing a medical office across town. His father had died 2 years earlier, a Marine Corps staff sergeant whose truck had been hit by a drunk driver on a Sunday afternoon. Wesley still wore his father's dog tags under his shirt, the metal cold against his skin. That first week passed in a blur of wrong turns and missed cues. Wesley sat alone at lunch in the far corner of the cafeteria near the emergency exit, a spot that seemed reserved for the invisible and forgotten. The cafeteria was a cavernous space with long tables arranged in rows, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the smell of overcooked vegetables and industrial pizza hanging in the air. The popular kids claimed the center tables like territory, their laughter loud and performative. Wesley kept his eyes on his food, a peanut butter sandwich he had made that morning and an apple that was starting to brown. Tyler Brennan noticed him on the third day. Tyler was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. The son of a successful real estate developer who owned half the commercial property in town. He had sandy blonde hair that he wore styled with too much product, a strong jaw, and the letter jacket that marked him as starting quarterback. He traveled with an entourage. Cody Martinez, lean and quick with a cruel smile and a talent for finding weaknesses. Brett Sullivan, thick-necked and simple, who laughed at everything Tyler said. And Jason Park, whose family owned the Korean barbecue restaurant downtown and who seemed to think proximity to Tyler erased his own outsider status. They were not particularly original in their cruelty, but they were consistent. And consistency can grind a person down more effectively than any single act of violence. It started small. A shoulder check in the hallway that sent Wesley's books scattering, laughter when he bent to pick them up, someone kicking his backpack under the bleachers during PE class so he had to crawl after it while Coach Morrison was distracted with his clipboard. Whispered comments just loud enough for Wesley to hear, but quiet enough that teachers would miss them. The words themselves did not matter much. Skinny, nerd, loser, poor. They were generic insults worn smooth by overuse. What mattered was the relentlessness, the way they created an atmosphere where Wesley could never fully relax, never stop anticipating the next small humiliation. In Mr. Peterson's American history class, Wesley sat in the second row and tried to focus on the lecture about westward expansion. The classroom smelled like old textbooks and the chemical tang of dry erase markers. Sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked the football field where the team practiced every afternoon. Tyler sat 3 rows back with Cody and Brett, and Wesley could feel their attention like heat on the back of his neck. When Mr. Peterson turned to write dates on the whiteboard, something small and hard hit Wesley between his shoulder blades. He did not turn around. Another projectile, probably a balled-up piece of paper or a pencil eraser. Wesley kept his eyes forward, his jaw tight. Mr. Peterson finished writing and turned back to the class, completely oblivious, launching into an explanation about manifest destiny that Wesley could barely hear over the sound of suppressed laughter behind him. At home, Wesley lived with his mother in a small two-bedroom apartment in a complex off Highway 36. His mother worked long hours at the clinic, often coming home after dark, smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion. She was a slight woman with worry lines deepening around her eyes and hands that never seemed to stop moving. She wanted so badly for things to be better, for this move to be the fresh start she had promised when she told Wesley they were leaving their old town and all its memories. Wesley did not tell her about school. What would be the point? She had enough to worry about, and he had learned from his father that you handled your own problems. His father had taught him that a man took care of his responsibilities, protected those weaker than himself, and never complained about the weight he carried. His father had also taught him something else, something Wesley had kept hidden like a secret weapon he was afraid to unsheath. Staff Sergeant Thomas Hammond had been a Marine Corps martial arts instructor at Camp Pendleton before his last assignment brought the family to Colorado. For years, from the time Wesley was barely tall enough to reach his father's waist, Thomas had trained him in the garage after dinner. Not the flashy tournament kata or the sport-focused sparring Wesley had seen in movies, but the real thing, the Marine Corps martial arts program that blended striking, grappling, weapons, and mental discipline into a system designed for combat. Wesley had loved those sessions, the patient way his father demonstrated techniques, the praise when Wesley executed a movement correctly, the deep satisfaction of physical exhaustion after a hard training session. They had stopped training 6 months before the accident when his father's deployment schedule became overwhelming. After Thomas died, Wesley had not thrown a single punch or practiced a single form. It felt like a betrayal somehow, like continuing without his father would be admitting he was really gone. The bullying escalated gradually over the following weeks, each incident a little worse than the last, testing boundaries, seeing how far they could push before Wesley broke or fought back. In the gymnasium during PE class, when students were supposed to be playing basketball, Wesley found himself picked last for teams as always. The gym was vast and echoing, the polished wood floor marked with overlapping lines for different sports, the smell of sweat and rubber balls hanging in the air. Coach Morrison, a former college linebacker whose glory days were decades behind him, mostly sat on the bleachers with his whistle and let the students self-organize. Tyler made sure Wesley ended up on his team, which meant Wesley would touch the ball exactly never. During one particularly chaotic scramble for a loose ball, Brett's elbow caught Wesley hard in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. Wesley bent double, gasping, and heard Brett say, "Oh, sorry, man, didn't see you there. You're like a ghost or something." Tyler laughed and clapped Brett on the shoulder. "That's actually perfect. Ghost, that's his name now, and it's stuck. Ghost." They called him that constantly, sometimes to his face, sometimes in stage whispers as he passed in the hallway. Other students picked it up, even ones who had never spoken to Wesley before, because that was how these things worked. A nickname, especially a mocking one, was like a brand that marked you as acceptable prey. The parking lot became another arena of anxiety. Ridgemont High had a sprawling asphalt lot, separated into sections for students, staff and visitors, bordered by chain-link fencing and overlooking the practice fields. Wesley did not have a car. His mother dropped him off in the morning on her way to work, and he took the bus home in the afternoon. The bus stop was at the far end of the lot near the maintenance shed, a location that required walking past the student parking section where Tyler's lifted Ford pickup truck sat like a throne, usually surrounded by his crew and their admirers. Wesley timed his departure carefully, waiting until most students had cleared out, but some days there was no avoiding it. Once he walked past, just as Tyler was holding court, telling some story to a cluster of girls who laughed at all the right moments. Tyler stopped mid-sentence and called out, "Hey, Ghost, you waiting for the short bus?" Cody added, "Maybe he's hoping someone will give him a ride." "What do you think, Tyler? Should we offer him a ride?" The girls giggled uncomfortably. Wesley kept walking, his face burning, his hands shaking slightly as they gripped his backpack straps. In the cafeteria, the humiliations took on a more creative edge. Wesley had started packing his lunch after the first week because it was cheaper and because it gave him one less thing to worry about. He would find an empty table, usually near the trash bins or tucked into corners where the popular kids never ventured, and eat quickly with a book propped open in front of him. The book was both shield and escape, a fantasy novel about a world where the weak could become powerful through training and determination. He was 3 chapters from the end when Jason sat down across from him without invitation. Wesley looked up, startled. Jason had a cafeteria tray with the daily special, some kind of chicken patty swimming in gravy. "Hey, I wanted to ask you something," Jason said, his voice friendly enough that Wesley actually hoped for a moment this might be genuine. "You ever eat at my parents' restaurant? Best Korean food in the state." Wesley shook his head. "No, sorry. You should come by sometime. I could probably get you a discount." Jason paused, then added casually, "Although I heard your family's pretty broke after your dad died." "Is that true?" The words hit Wesley like a physical blow. His throat tightened and he could not immediately respond. Jason must have seen something in his face because he smiled, a small, cruel twist of his mouth. "Just wondering. Tyler was asking about you. He likes to know who he's dealing with." Jason stood and walked away, leaving Wesley sitting there with his hands trembling and his appetite completely gone. The fact that they knew about his father, that they had researched him like he was some kind of project, made everything worse. It meant this was not random. It meant they had chosen him specifically and were committed to whatever game they were playing. The weeks blurred together in a haze of small torments. Textbooks knocked from his hands in crowded hallways, always in the crush of bodies where it was impossible to identify the culprit. His locker jammed with gum in the mechanism, so he had to go to the office for help, while Tyler and his crew watched from down the hall, smirking. His gym clothes stolen from his locker during PE, so he had to explain to Coach Morrison why he could not dress out, earning a lecture about responsibility and a threat of grade reduction. The bathroom mirrors scrawled with "Ghost was here" in permanent marker, which earned him a suspicious look from Vice Principal Drummond, who seemed to think Wesley himself might be behind it. At home, Wesley's mother noticed the change even though he tried to hide it. One evening she came home early and found him sitting at the small kitchen table, staring at his homework without really seeing it. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. She put her purse down and sat across from him, her scrubs still on, her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail that emphasized how thin her face had become. "You okay, sweetie?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. "Yeah, just tired." "How's the new school?" "Making friends." "It's fine. Normal high school stuff." She studied him for a long moment, and Wesley could see her trying to decide whether to push. Finally, she reached across and squeezed his hand. "I know this has been hard, the move, everything, but we're going to be okay. You know that, right?" Wesley nodded, because that was what she needed to see. After she went to shower, he sat there in the growing darkness, his father's dog tags cold against his chest, and wondered how much more he could take before something inside him broke permanently. The breaking point came in October, on a Friday that started with rain and never quite cleared. The hallways smelled like wet jackets and tracked in mud, and everyone was irritable from being cooped up indoors during lunch. Wesley had history fourth period right before lunch, and he had allowed himself to relax slightly because Tyler had been absent the previous day with what Coach Morrison had announced was a minor sports injury, though the rumor mill said he had gotten into a fight at a party off campus. With Tyler gone, the others seemed less motivated, and Wesley had experienced 24 hours of something close to peace. But Tyler was back that Friday, and whatever had happened to him had not improved his mood. Wesley noticed him immediately when he entered the history classroom, Tyler's jaw tight, a purple bruise visible along his cheekbone that makeup had not quite covered. He sat in his usual spot with Cody and Brett flanking him like bodyguards. Wesley took his seat and tried to make himself invisible, opening his notebook and reviewing his notes from the previous class. Mr. Peterson was late, which was unusual, and the classroom descended into the barely controlled chaos that always emerged in a teacher's absence. Students clustered in groups, talking and laughing. Someone threw a paper airplane that sailed across the room and hit the whiteboard. Wesley felt rather than saw Tyler approaching. Then Tyler was standing next to Wesley's desk, looking down at him with an expression that mixed boredom and malice in equal measure. "Hey, Ghost," Tyler said conversationally. "I heard you've been talking about me." Wesley's stomach dropped. "I haven't. That's not what I heard." Jason said, "You've been telling people I'm scared of you, that I only pick on you because I'm insecure. That's not true. I never said anything like that." "So you're calling Jason a liar?" It was a trap with no right answer. Wesley said nothing, his hands gripping the edge of his desk hard enough that his knuckles went white. The classroom had gone quiet, everyone watching now, sensing blood in the water. Tyler smiled, and it did not reach his eyes. "You know what I think? I think you need to learn your place." Tyler reached down and grabbed Wesley's notebook, ripping it out from under his hands. Wesley started to stand, an automatic response to defend his property, but Cody had moved behind him and shoved him back into his seat hard enough that the desk scraped loudly against the floor. Tyler flipped through the notebook, pages of careful notes and copied homework assignments, then tore out a handful of pages and let them flutter to the ground like leaves. "Whoops," Tyler said. "Clumsy me." Wesley sat frozen, humiliation burning through him like acid. He wanted to stand, wanted to do something, but the fear of making it worse paralyzed him. Tyler turned and walked back to his seat to scattered laughter and a few uncomfortable sounds from students who were relieved not to be the target. Wesley bent and gathered the torn pages with shaking hands, and when Mr. Peterson finally arrived 3 minutes later, flustered and apologizing for being held up in a meeting, Wesley was still picking up pieces of his notebook from the floor. Mr. Peterson glanced at him, seemed about to say something, then decided against it and launched into the day's lecture on the Civil War as if nothing had happened. Lunch that day was worse. Wesley went through the line with money his mother had given him for a hot meal, a rare treat, and got the chicken fingers and fries that were the only cafeteria food that tasted even remotely acceptable. He found his usual table near the emergency exit and sat down with his tray, his torn notebook repaired as best he could with tape from the library. He was 3 bites into his lunch when he noticed the smell. Peanut butter, strong and unmistakable. He shifted in his seat and felt something wet and sticky on the back of his jeans. He reached back and his hand came away smeared with chunky peanut butter that had been spread thickly across his chair seat. The realization hit him like a punch. He shot to his feet, his tray clattering, and twisted to look at the back of his pants. The entire seat was covered in peanut butter, ground in now from his weight, a large brown stain that would not come out without serious washing. Laughter erupted from the center tables where Tyler and his crew sat watching. They must have done it before he arrived, must have been waiting and watching to see his reaction. Other students turned to look, pointing and whispering. Wesley stood there paralyzed, his face burning with shame, peanut butter dripping down the back of his legs. "Oh man, Ghost sat in something," Cody called out, his voice carrying across the cafeteria. "That's nasty." Tyler was laughing so hard he had tears in his eyes. Brett was recording it on his phone, the camera pointed directly at Wesley's humiliation. Wesley grabbed his backpack and ran from the cafeteria, the laughter following him like a wave. He went straight to the bathroom, locked himself in a stall, and tried to clean himself up with wet paper towels. But the peanut butter had soaked through to his underwear, and the brown stain was impossible to hide. He stayed there through the rest of lunch and most of fifth period, sitting on a toilet with his head in his hands, fighting back tears that he refused to let fall. When he finally emerged, he went to the office and called his mother, telling the secretary he was sick. His mother left work early to pick him up, her face creased with worry, asking questions he deflected with vague answers about food poisoning. In the car ride home, Wesley stared out the window at the grey sky and felt something shift inside him. He could not keep living like this. Something had to change, even if he did not know what or how. That night, after his mother had gone to bed, Wesley stood in the small living room of their apartment in the darkness, lit only by the glow of streetlights through the window. He moved through the first form his father had taught him, the movements slow and rusty after 2 years of neglect. His body remembered even if his mind had tried to forget. Block, strike, turn, stance. The choreography of violence performed in silence. He made it halfway through before he had to stop, his breath coming hard, his eyes wet. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Martial arts is not about hurting people, Wesley. It's about discipline, control, protecting yourself and others. The moment you use it out of anger or ego, you've already lost." Wesley sank down onto the couch, his father's dog tags clutched in one hand, and made a decision. He could not use what his father had taught him. That was not who he wanted to be. But he also could not keep enduring this slow destruction of his spirit. There had to be another way. The following Monday, Wesley returned to school determined to keep his head down even more than before, to become so invisible that they would lose interest and move on to easier prey. It was a strategy born of desperation, and it might have worked if the universe had not intervened in the unlikely form of Mr. Nakamura, the school janitor. Hideo Nakamura was perhaps 70 years old, a small man with silver hair cut military short and a face that seemed carved from weathered wood. He moved through the school with quiet efficiency, pushing his yellow mop bucket and trash cart, nodding politely to students and staff alike. Most people barely noticed him, the way they did not notice the walls or the lockers. He was simply part of the background machinery that kept the school functioning. Wesley first really saw him on a Tuesday afternoon in the library, when Wesley was hiding out during what should have been his free period. The library was a refuge, a place where Mrs. Chen, the librarian, enforced strict rules about noise and behavior that even Tyler's crew generally respected. Wesley was in his usual spot, a table in the back corner near the reference section where almost nobody came, working on a calculus assignment. He was so focused on the problems that he did not hear Mr. Nakamura approach until the janitor was right beside him, emptying the small trash can near the table. Wesley glanced up and their eyes met. Mr. Nakamura looked at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then said quietly, "You carry yourself like someone with weight on their shoulders." Wesley was so surprised to be directly addressed that he did not know how to respond. Mr. Nakamura continued, "When I was a young man, I learned that the heaviest burdens are the ones we think we must carry alone." Then he moved on to the next trash can, leaving Wesley staring after him in confusion. It was such an odd interaction that Wesley almost forgot about it by the end of the day, but something about the way Mr. Nakamura had looked at him stuck in his mind, like he had seen something beneath the surface that no one else noticed. The bullying continued through October and into November as the weather turned cold and the days grew shorter. Tyler and his crew had refined their methods. finding new ways to torment Wesley that stayed just under the threshold of what would get them in serious trouble. They were careful now. Nothing that left visible marks, nothing that could be easily reported. The peanut butter incident had been widely witnessed but also easily dismissed by administrators as a prank gone too far, and Wesley had declined to identify who had done it when Vice Principal Drummond asked, knowing that snitching would only make things exponentially worse. In English class, taught by Ms. Rodriguez, a young teacher who seemed genuinely passionate about literature, Wesley found himself reading Romeo and Juliet along with the rest of his class. Ms. Rodriguez had organized the class into reading groups, and by cruel coincidence or deliberate design, Wesley ended up in a group with Cody and two girls, Emma and Jess, who clearly wanted nothing to do with the drama, but were too polite to object overtly. They met in the hallway outside the classroom, sitting on the floor with their backs against lockers, and were supposed to be discussing the themes of fate and choice in Act 3. Cody spent the entire 20 minutes of group work making quiet comments about Wesley's clothes, his glasses, the way he pronounced certain words when he read his assigned part aloud. The girls said nothing, their discomfort obvious, but not enough to make them speak up. When the period ended and they returned to the classroom, Wesley realized his backpack had been moved from where he had left it by his desk. He found it in the hallway outside, and when he opened it, all his books and notebooks were there but rearranged slightly, and there was a note tucked into his calculus textbook. He unfolded it to find a crude drawing of a stick figure with X's for eyes and ghost written underneath. It was juvenile and stupid, but the violation of his things, the knowledge that they had gone through his backpack while he was in the hall, made him feel exposed and vulnerable in a way that was hard to articulate. The parking lot incidents intensified as the weather got colder. Tyler had started a routine where he would deliberately park his truck in a way that blocked the walking path to the bus stop, forcing Wesley to either walk the long way around or squeeze between vehicles. One afternoon in mid-November, as Wesley was navigating this obstacle course, Tyler and his crew were hanging out by the truck, their breath visible in the cold air, passing around a football. As Wesley approached, Tyler called out, "Hey, Ghost, catch!" and threw the football directly at Wesley's head. Wesley, operating on instinct and reflexes that were the legacy of his father's training, caught the ball cleanly out of the air, his hands snapping up without conscious thought. For a moment he stood there holding the ball, and Tyler's smile faded into something harder. "Huh," Tyler said. "Didn't know you had it in you." Wesley tossed the ball back, deliberately soft, and Tyler caught it easily. "Cool," Tyler said, his voice flat. "Maybe you're not completely useless." But his eyes said something else, and Wesley knew he had made a mistake. He had shown competence, and that made him more interesting as a target rather than less. Sure enough, in gym class the next day, Tyler made sure to pick Wesley for his basketball team again, but this time he actually passed him the ball during a play. Wesley, surprised, caught it and found himself with a clear lane to the basket. Years of playing pickup games in his old neighborhood kicked in, and he went for the layup, the ball arcing perfectly off the backboard and through the net. It should have been a moment of small triumph, but Tyler's reaction was immediate and cold. "Don't get cocky, Ghost," he said, loud enough for the whole gym to hear. For the rest of the game, Wesley did not touch the ball again, and when they were changing back in the locker room afterward, Wesley found his clothes in a pile on the shower floor, soaked through. Olivia Martinez entered Wesley's life in mid-November, like a shaft of sunlight through storm clouds. She was in his English class, a quiet presence with long dark hair and observant eyes, who usually sat 2 rows over and 1 seat back. She was Cody's cousin, which was complicated, but she had none of Cody's cruelty. She was smart without being showy about it, an artist who filled the margins of her notebooks with intricate drawings, and one of the few students at Ridgemont who seemed genuinely kind. Wesley first spoke to her when they were both waiting outside Ms. Rodriguez's classroom before the bell, and Olivia noticed the fantasy novel Wesley was reading between classes. "Is that any good?" she asked, gesturing at the book. Wesley looked up, startled to be addressed. "Yeah, it's great. The sequel's even better. I've been meaning to read that series. Everyone says it's amazing." She smiled at him, a real smile with warmth in it, and Wesley felt something loosen slightly in his chest. They started talking about books, a safe, neutral topic, and over the following weeks they had more conversations in brief moments between classes or in the library when they happened to be there at the same time. Olivia was easy to talk to, interested in ideas and stories rather than social hierarchy. She told him she wanted to study art in college, maybe illustration or graphic design. She showed him some of her drawings, fantasy characters and landscapes that had a dreamlike quality. Wesley found himself looking forward to these conversations more than he wanted to admit, a small bright spot in days that were otherwise grey. But Tyler noticed. Of course Tyler noticed. He noticed everything that might be leveraged into a weapon. One day in the cafeteria, as Wesley was carrying his lunch tray to his usual isolated table, Tyler called out across the room, "Hey, Ghost, I saw you talking to Olivia." "You got a crush on Cody's cousin?" The cafeteria noise dimmed slightly as people tuned in to this new drama. Wesley kept walking, his face burning. Tyler continued, "That's cute. You think a girl like that would ever look at someone like you? Maybe if you actually existed." Cody added, "Yeah, stay away from my cousin, Ghost." "That's family business." Wesley sat down at his table and ate his lunch without tasting it, his appetite gone. He did not want to drag Olivia into this mess. The next time he saw her in the hallway, he tried to walk past without stopping, but she called his name and fell into step beside him. "Hey, I heard what Tyler said in the cafeteria. Don't listen to him. He's an idiot." "It's fine," Wesley said, not meeting her eyes. "It's not fine. He's a bully and everyone knows it." She paused, then added, "I like talking to you. You're one of the only people in this school who has interesting things to say." Wesley felt a complicated mix of emotions, gratitude, fear, and a painful kind of hope. "Thanks. But maybe we shouldn't talk at school. It'll just make things worse." Olivia frowned. "Wesley, you can't let people like Tyler control your life." But the problem was that people like Tyler already controlled large parts of his life, whether Wesley wanted them to or not. Olivia did not understand because she had Cody's protection by family association and the social capital that came with it. Wesley had nothing. Still, he found it hard to completely avoid her, and their conversations continued, briefer now, more furtive, but no less meaningful. December arrived with the first snowfall, light flurries that dusted the practice fields and turned the parking lot into a skating rink. The school took on a muted quality, sound deadened by snow, the hallways tracked with slush. Christmas decorations appeared in classrooms despite the district's official policy of winter-themed rather than religious decor. Wesley's mother worked extra hours to pay for heating bills and tried to save for Christmas presents, though Wesley told her he did not need anything, he just wanted her to rest. At night in their apartment, Wesley continued practicing the forms his father had taught him, moving through the sequences in the small living room, his body starting to remember the rhythms and patterns. He did not know why he was doing this. It was not like he planned to use it, but the practice brought a kind of peace, a connection to his father, and a sense of discipline and control that he lacked everywhere else in his life. One afternoon, staying late in the library to avoid the parking lot rush, Wesley was startled when Mr. Nakamura appeared beside his table again. The library was nearly empty, Mrs. Chen at her desk working on cataloguing new books, the heating system humming and clicking. Mr. Nakamura set down his mop bucket and looked at Wesley with those calm, assessing eyes. "You study hard," the old man observed. "Just homework," Wesley replied. I see you often. Always alone. Always. He paused, searching for a word. Contained, like pot with lid on tight. Pressure builds. Wesley did not know what to say to that. Mr. Nakamura pulled out the chair across from Wesley and sat down, which was so unexpected that Wesley just stared. Up close, the janitor had scars on his hands, the kind that came from hard use, and when he moved, there was a controlled grace to it that seemed unusual for a man his age. When I was young, Mr. Nakamura said, I had much anger, made many mistakes, lost many things. He paused. Teacher told me, anger is fire. Can warm you or burn you. Choice is how you use it. Wesley found his voice. I'm not angry. Mr. Nakamura's slight smile suggested he did not believe that. Everyone has anger. Question is not if, but what you do with it. He stood, gathering his mop bucket. You remind me of someone, me, many years ago. Perhaps you come to my workshop sometime, behind school near maintenance shed. After school, Thursday and Friday, I teach balance, control, things that helped me. He walked away before Wesley could respond, leaving Wesley sitting there confused and oddly moved. What kind of things did a school janitor teach in a maintenance workshop? But something about the old man's calm presence and the way he had spoken, with no judgment, only observation, made Wesley consider it. He spent the next few days thinking about the offer while enduring the continuing harassment from Tyler's crew. They had started a new game where they would deliberately walk close to Wesley in the hallways, bumping into him hard enough to make him drop things, then apologizing with exaggerated sincerity that fooled no teachers but convinced no one else. On a Thursday in mid-December, Wesley stayed after school and found his way to the maintenance area. The workshop was a separate building behind the main school, a cinder block structure that had probably been built as storage, but had been converted into a space where Mr. Nakamura apparently did repairs and kept supplies. Wesley knocked on the metal door and Mr. Nakamura opened it, showing no surprise at Wesley's appearance. Come in, the old man said simply. The workshop was warmer than Wesley expected, heated by a small space heater in the corner. It smelled like machine oil and sawdust. One wall held tools organized with military precision. There was a workbench covered in projects, a desk lamp being repaired, a broken chair being reglued. The floor was clear except for a blue mat that looked like it belonged in a gym. Mr. Nakamura gestured at the mat. You know martial arts? He asked. Wesley hesitated, then nodded. My dad taught me. Some. Before he died. Mr. Nakamura's expression softened very slightly. What did he teach? Marine Corps system, striking, grappling. I haven't practiced in a long time. Show me. Wesley felt self-conscious, but stepped onto the mat and moved through the first form, the basic sequence of blocks and strikes that his father had drilled into him thousands of times. His execution was rusty, his stance not quite right, but the muscle memory was there. When he finished, Mr. Nakamura nodded slowly. Your father taught you well. Foundation is strong, but you are... He made a gesture like something crumbling. Broken inside. Technique without spirit is empty. You fight yourself more than any enemy. Wesley felt exposed in a way that was both uncomfortable and oddly relieving. I can't use it, he said. My dad always said martial arts wasn't about fighting. It was about discipline and protecting people. Using it to hurt someone who made you angry was wrong. Your father was wise, man, but there is difference between using violence from anger and using skill to protect yourself. You understand? Wesley was not sure he did. Mr. Nakamura continued, You have boys who hurt you at school, yes? I see, I notice, but you do nothing because you're afraid of becoming what you do not want to be. I just don't want to make it worse. It is already worse. Every day you accept, you teach them you're acceptable to hurt. This is not balance, this is surrender. Mr. Nakamura walked to the workbench and picked up the lamp he was repairing. This lamp, very old, given to me by my teacher many years ago. Broken when I received it, I could have thrown away, but I repair, careful, with respect. Now it works again, more beautiful for having been broken and remade. He set the lamp down. You are like this lamp, broken by loss, by fear. But breaking is not end, is opportunity to rebuild stronger. Wesley felt something shift in his chest, a hairline crack in the wall he had built around himself. I don't know how to do that. Then I teach you. Not just technique, not just fighting, balance, control, mind and body together, like your father taught, but deeper. You come here 3 days each week, we train. Maybe after a few months you are a different person, or maybe same person, but stronger version. Mr. Nakamura paused. But you must decide. I cannot force. This is your choice. Wesley thought about it for approximately 3 seconds. Every other path led to more of the same, a slow, grinding destruction of who he was. This was something different, a hand reaching out in darkness. Yes, he said, I want to train. Mr. Nakamura smiled, a real smile that transformed his weathered face. Good. Then we begin. But first rule, training is not for revenge. Not for anger, is for balance, you understand? The moment you train to hurt those boys, you lose everything. You train to find yourself again, the rest will follow. And so Wesley's transformation began, quietly and without fanfare, in a cinder block workshop behind Ridgemont High School. They started with basics, breathing exercises that seemed absurdly simple, but left Wesley surprisingly exhausted. Mr. Nakamura explained that everything started with breath, with the ability to stay calm under pressure, to control the fight-or-flight response that made people either freeze or lash out. They worked on stance, on route, on the way Wesley held tension in his shoulders and jaw without realizing it. Mr. Nakamura was patient but exacting, correcting minute details of posture and movement that Wesley would never have noticed on his own. Your father taught you mechanics, Mr. Nakamura explained. This is good, very good. But martial arts is more than mechanics, is philosophy, is way of living. Every movement must have purpose, have intention. When you block, you are not just moving arm. You are drawing line in space that says, this far, no further. You understand? Wesley was starting to. They trained Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays after school for an hour each session. Wesley told his mother he had joined a study group, which was technically true, just not the kind of study group she imagined. The training was hard work, physically and mentally demanding in ways Wesley had not expected. Mr. Nakamura did not focus on flashy techniques or aggressive combinations. Instead, they worked on fundamentals, how to move efficiently, how to generate power from the hips and core rather than just the arms, how to stay balanced and centered even when tired or off balance. But they also talked, and these conversations were as important as the physical training. Mr. Nakamura told stories about his own life, carefully edited but revealing. He had grown up in California after his family's internment during World War II, carrying anger and resentment that poisoned his youth. He had learned martial arts from an Okinawan teacher who had lived through the war and its aftermath with a philosophy of strength through peace. Mr. Nakamura had made mistakes, hurt people he should have protected, and spent decades learning to live with those mistakes while trying to do better. The boys who trouble you, Mr. Nakamura said one evening in January, they are boys with their own pain. This does not excuse them, but understanding helps you not become them. Tyler, the leader, I know his father. Successful man, very demanding, never satisfied. Tyler tries to fill hole inside by being strong, being feared. Is sad, really, but also dangerous. Wesley had never thought about Tyler as someone with pain. It was easier to see him as simply evil, a force of nature to be endured. But Mr. Nakamura's words lodged in Wesley's mind, a seed that would germinate slowly. Meanwhile, the training continued. They worked on strikes, Not wild haymakers, but controlled, focused techniques that used the whole body. They worked on blocks that were really redirects, turning an attacker's force aside rather than meeting it head-on. They worked on grappling fundamentals, the basic human chess of positioning and leverage that let a smaller person control a larger one. And gradually, Wesley began to change. It was subtle at first, not something he even noticed until it was pointed out. One day in late January, his mother commented that he seemed different, lighter somehow, less withdrawn. In the mirror, Wesley could see small changes. His shoulders were no longer permanently hunched forward. His posture was straighter. There was a quality to the way he moved that suggested confidence rather than apology. The training was rebuilding him from the foundation up, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. At school, the bullying continued, but Wesley's response to it evolved. He still did not fight back, but there was a different quality to his endurance now. When Tyler's crew knocked into him in the hallway, Wesley no longer stumbled and scrambled to pick up his books. He absorbed the impact with bent knees and proper posture, staying balanced, then calmly retrieved his things with movements that were economical and controlled. It was a small thing, but Tyler noticed. Wesley saw the flicker of confusion in Tyler's eyes, the slight recalculation. Olivia noticed too. They still talked occasionally, careful conversations in the library or brief exchanges between classes, and she remarked on the change. "You seem different lately," she said one afternoon in early February. "More here. Like you're actually present instead of trying to disappear." Wesley smiled, a real smile. "I've been working on some things. Personal stuff. It's good. Whatever it is, it's working." She paused. "Tyler's been worse lately, have you noticed? Like he's angrier." Wesley had noticed. Tyler's bruise from October had healed, but his temperament had not improved. If anything, he seemed more volatile, his cruelty sharper. Cody had mentioned to someone in Wesley's hearing that Tyler's father was pressuring him about college recruitment, about football scholarships that might not materialize. The stress was being channeled into his treatment of anyone he perceived as beneath him, and Wesley remained a favorite target. In February, the harassment escalated in ways that were harder to ignore. Someone, undoubtedly Tyler or one of his crew, started a rumor that Wesley had been expelled from his previous school for bringing a weapon, a complete fabrication that had no basis in reality but spread like wildfire through the social networks of Ridgemont High. Wesley found himself getting suspicious looks from teachers and wide berth from students who had previously ignored him. Vice Principal Drummond called him into the office for a chat that was really an interrogation about his past, his behavior, whether there was anything the administration should know. Wesley denied everything truthfully, and Drummond eventually let him go with a warning to keep his nose clean, as if Wesley had any control over what lies people invented about him. The rumor made things harder with Olivia. She knew it was false, but Cody, her cousin, was under Tyler's influence and pressuring her to distance herself from Wesley for her own reputation. They had an awkward conversation in the library where Olivia apologized for her cousin's behavior and told Wesley she believed in him, but also that she needed to be careful. Wesley understood, even though it hurt. This was the price of association with someone marked as a target. At home, Wesley's mother was working so much that they barely saw each other except on weekends. Money was tight, it was always tight, and she had taken on extra shifts to save for Wesley's future, for college applications and SAT prep courses that Wesley insisted he did not need. One Saturday morning, Wesley woke early and found her asleep on the couch, still in her scrubs, too exhausted to make it to bed. He covered her with a blanket and made breakfast quietly in the kitchen, scrambled eggs and toast, leaving a plate for her in the microwave. His father's dog tags hung around his neck and he touched them absently. A habit. His father had been strong, capable, and respected. Wesley was working to become those things, but the gap between who he was and who he wanted to be still felt enormous. The training with Mr. Nakamura intensified through February and March. They had moved beyond pure fundamentals and were working on application, how to read an opponent's intentions, how to create and exploit openings, how to end a confrontation quickly and decisively without excessive force. Mr. Nakamura emphasized control above all else. "When you have true skill," he said one evening, "you can choose. You can hurt badly or you can subdue with no injury. This choice is what separates martial artist from street fighter. Street fighter knows only destruction. Martial artist knows many options and chooses the minimum necessary. This is control. This is power." They did scenario training where Mr. Nakamura would simulate attacks, grabs, pushes, wild haymakers, and Wesley had to respond with appropriate technique and force. It was harder than it sounded because the appropriate response was often restraint. Mr. Nakamura would grab Wesley's shirt and Wesley would have to break the grip and establish control without striking. Or Mr. Nakamura would throw a slow-motion punch and Wesley had to slip it, redirect it, and position for a counter that he did not throw. The lesson was always the same. Know that you can, but choose not to unless absolutely necessary. In real fight, in moment of danger, you will not rise to occasion, Mr. Nakamura said. You will fall to level of your training. This is why we train the right way now, so when pressure comes, your body knows what to do without thinking. You do not choose techniques in fight. You choose them now in training, so they are automatic when needed. By mid-March, Wesley had been training for 3 months, and the transformation was undeniable. He had put on lean muscle from the constant practice, his movements had a fluid grace that came from thousands of repetitions, and most importantly, he had developed an unshakable calm that Mr. Nakamura called centered. Wesley no longer flinched when Tyler approached. He no longer felt the spike of fear when he had to walk past the crew in the parking lot. He simply existed in his own space, untouchable in a way that was psychological rather than physical. This new Wesley was intriguing to Tyler, and intrigue was dangerous. One afternoon in late March, Tyler stopped Wesley in the hallway, not a shoulder check or casual intimidation, but deliberately blocking his path. They were alone in the corridor between the gym and the academic wing, everyone else at lunch or in class. "You're different, Ghost," Tyler said, studying Wesley with narrowed eyes. "What changed?" "Nothing changed," Wesley replied calmly. "Bullshit, you stand different, move different. You think you're tough now? Think you can stand up to me?" Wesley met Tyler's eyes without aggression, without fear, just steady presence. "I don't think about you at all." It was the perfect thing to say to someone whose entire identity was built on being noticed, feared, respected. Tyler's face darkened and he shoved Wesley hard in the chest with both hands. A month ago, Wesley would have stumbled back. Now, he absorbed the force, his stance solid, and when Tyler pushed him again, Wesley was unmoved. Tyler's confusion was visible, and his confusion made him angrier. He grabbed Wesley's shirt, pulling him close. "Listen to me, Ghost. I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to remember your place. You're nothing. You understand? Nothing." Wesley reached up and gently but firmly removed Tyler's hands from his shirt, a simple technique Mr. Nakamura had taught him for breaking grips. Tyler was so surprised he did not resist. Wesley stepped back, maintaining the space between them. "I understand," Wesley said quietly. "Do you?" He walked away, leaving Tyler standing there processing what had just happened. Wesley knew he had just made things significantly worse, had essentially issued a challenge whether he meant to or not. But he also felt a strange kind of peace. He was no longer afraid. Whatever happened next, he would handle it. What happened next was a systematic escalation. Tyler took the hallway interaction personally as a public humiliation, even though no one had witnessed it, and his response was to unite his crew in a coordinated campaign to break Wesley. In early April, they started following him, always just barely within the bounds of acceptable behavior, but clearly threatening. They would show up wherever Wesley went: the library, the parking lot, even the bus stop where they had no reason to be. They made comments just loud enough for Wesley to hear about what they were planning to do to him, how they were going to teach him a lesson. Cody started spreading new rumors, these even worse than before. He told people Wesley had made threats against Tyler, that he had been seen with a knife, that he had a history of violence. None of it was true, but truth did not matter when the story was compelling and the teller was popular. Teachers started watching Wesley more closely. Coach Morrison pulled him aside after PE class and asked if there was any issue between him and Tyler that needed to be addressed. Wesley said no, because what could he say that would be believed or would help? Olivia tried to warn him. They had a tense conversation behind the school one afternoon when she had tracked him down specifically to talk. "Cody's been saying things," she told Wesley. "He's convincing Tyler that you're actually a threat, that you've been training to fight him." "I think they're planning something." "I haven't threatened anyone," Wesley said. "I know that, but they don't care. Tyler's pride is hurt and Cody's been feeding into it. Please be careful. Maybe stay home for a few days. I can't hide from them forever." "I'm not saying forever, just until they cool down." But Wesley could not shake the feeling that cooling down was not in the cards, that this had been building towards something since his first day at Ridgemont, and the only question was when and where it would explode. He continued training with Mr. Nakamura, and the old man must have sensed something in Wesley's demeanor because their sessions took on a different quality. They spent more time on meditation and breathing, on maintaining calm in the face of pressure. Mr. Nakamura told a story about a tea master who was challenged by a samurai and faced death with such perfect calm that the samurai was shamed and withdrew his challenge. "Your battle is not just physical," Mr. Nakamura said, "is battle of spirit. Who can maintain balance when all around is chaos? This is true strength. If you can stay centered when they try to break you, you have already won the most important fight." Wesley tried to internalize this, to find that center Mr. Nakamura described. But it was hard when he could feel the storm approaching, could sense that something was going to break and break soon. The pressure built through April, a tightening coil of tension that seemed to affect the whole school. People noticed, teachers whispered in corners, students took sides without fully understanding what the sides were, and Tyler grew more volatile, more unpredictable. The incident that served as the final catalyst came on a Friday in late April, a warm spring day when the windows were open and the air smelled like cut grass and possibility. Wesley was in the parking lot after school, walking toward the bus stop as he did every day when he heard shouting. He looked up to see a crowd forming near Tyler's truck. Curious despite his better judgment, Wesley moved closer and saw Tyler and Cody confronting a freshman student, a small kid with thick glasses whose name Wesley did not know. The kid's backpack was on the ground, his books scattered. Tyler was in his face, shouting about the kid bumping into him, demanding an apology. Wesley should have kept walking. It was not his problem, not his fight. But the kid's face, terrified, humiliated, helpless, looked exactly like how Wesley had felt in October when they had smeared peanut butter on his chair. And Wesley found he could not keep walking. His father's voice echoed in his memory, something Thomas Hammond had said often. "Martial arts is about protecting those who can't protect themselves." Wesley stepped into the circle. "Leave him alone." The crowd went silent. Tyler turned, his expression shifting from anger at the freshman to delighted surprise at this new development. "What did you just say to me, Ghost? I said leave him alone. He's just a kid. And who's going to make me?" "You?" Tyler laughed, and Cody and Brett laughed with him, but there was an edge to it. The crowd sensed drama, pulled out phones, started recording. Wesley kept his breathing steady, his hands relaxed at his sides. He apologized. "It's over. Just let him go." Tyler stepped away from the freshman and moved toward Wesley instead, closing the distance until they were face to face. Tyler had height and weight on Wesley, the physical advantages that had always mattered in these schoolyard hierarchies. But Wesley did not back down, did not flinch. He simply stood there, balanced and centered, meeting Tyler's eyes without malice or fear. "You've got some nerve," Tyler said. "After all this time playing ghost, now you want to be a hero. I just don't want you to hurt someone who can't defend themselves." "You think you can defend yourself? You think that because you've been hitting the gym or doing whatever you've been doing that you're tough now?" Tyler was breathing hard, adrenaline pumping, looking for an excuse. "You want to find out?" Wesley said nothing. Mr. Nakamura had taught him that sometimes silence was the strongest response. The freshman took the opportunity to grab his backpack and scatter books and run, and Wesley was glad for that at least. The crowd pressed closer, sensing a fight, that ancient lizard-brain excitement at the prospect of violence. Wesley could feel the weight of all those eyes, all those phone cameras. Whatever happened next would be recorded and shared. There was no privacy in the moment, no way to back down without looking weak. Tyler shoved Wesley hard, a two-handed push to the chest. Wesley rode it, his stance absorbing the impact, and Tyler's surprise was visible. Tyler shoved again, harder, and Wesley still did not fall. The crowd murmured. Tyler was getting embarrassed now, his face reddening, and embarrassment made him reckless. He cocked back his right arm to throw a punch, and Wesley saw it coming, saw the telltale tensing of Tyler's shoulder, the slight drop of his chin. Time seemed to slow. Wesley could have ended it right there. Mr. Nakamura's training had given him dozens of options. A slip and counter, a simple arm drag into off-balancing, even just a clean evasion that would make Tyler look foolish. But Wesley thought about his father, about the promise he had made to himself that he would not use what he had learned out of anger or ego. He thought about Mr. Nakamura's words. Martial arts is not about winning, it is about choosing the right outcome. So Wesley did the hardest thing he had ever done. He did nothing. He stood there and let Tyler's punch connect, a solid hit to his jaw that snapped his head to the side and sent pain exploding through his skull. Wesley staggered, his vision blurring, tasting blood. The crowd gasped. Tyler looked shocked at his own action, suddenly aware that he had crossed a line in full view of witnesses. But the moment was broken by Coach Morrison's voice cutting through the parking lot. "What the hell is going on here?" Everyone stepped back now. The crowd dispersed instantly, students scattering, phones disappearing into pockets. Tyler stepped back, his hands up in a gesture of innocence. Coach Morrison approached, his face red with fury, looking from Tyler to Wesley, who was now sitting on the asphalt, one hand on his jaw. Wesley's vision was clearing, but his head was ringing like a bell. "Did you just hit him, Brennan?" Coach Morrison demanded. "It was self-defense, Coach," he came at me. "That's not what I saw." One of the students, a girl named Amy, who was in Wesley's English class, stepped forward nervously. "Tyler hit him. Wesley didn't do anything." Other students nodded, corroborating. Tyler's face went pale. Physical violence on campus, witnessed by a teacher, was an automatic suspension, possibly expulsion depending on severity. Coach Morrison grabbed Tyler's arm. "You're coming to the office. Now, don't even think about running." He looked at Wesley. "You need to come too. Do you need the nurse first?" Wesley slowly got to his feet, his jaw throbbing but nothing broken. "I'm okay." "You're sure?" "That was a solid hit." "I'm sure." The walk to Vice Principal Drummond's office was surreal. Coach Morrison escorted Tyler to one waiting area and Wesley to another, keeping them separated. Within minutes, Wesley's mother was called. Tyler's father was called, and the administrative machinery of consequences began to grind. Wesley sat in a hard plastic chair outside Drummond's office, an ice pack pressed to his swelling jaw, and tried to process what had just happened. He had refused to fight back. He had taken the hit. And somehow, that felt like victory, like he had passed some test that mattered more than winning a parking lot brawl. Vice Principal Drummond interviewed multiple witnesses, reviewed phone footage that students voluntarily provided, and reached the conclusion that any reasonable person would. Tyler had instigated and thrown the first punch at a student who had not fought back. Tyler was suspended for 2 weeks, pending a disciplinary hearing that would determine if expulsion was warranted. Tyler's father, a red-faced man in an expensive suit who arrived radiating fury, threatened lawsuits and made accusations about Wesley's character that Drummond shut down immediately with the witness testimony. Wesley was sent home with his mother after being cleared of any wrongdoing, in fact being praised quietly by Drummond for his restraint in not retaliating. In the car on the way home, Wesley's mother kept looking at him, her hands tight on the steering wheel. Finally, she said, "What's been going on at school, Wesley? And please don't tell me nothing. A boy doesn't get punched in front of witnesses unless there's a history." So Wesley told her, not everything but enough. The bullying, the small humiliations, the way Tyler and his crew had made his life miserable for months. His mother listened with her jaw tight and tears in her eyes, and when he finished, she pulled over into a parking lot and hugged him hard. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You had enough to worry about. I wanted to handle it myself. You're my son. Nothing is more important than you. Do you understand that?" She pulled back, looking at him. "And you didn't fight back, even when he hit you?" "Dad always said, 'I know what your father said, and he would be so proud of you right now.' Do you know that? So incredibly proud." She was crying now, and Wesley realized he was too. They sat in that parking lot for a long time, holding each other, releasing grief and fear and relief in equal measure. Tyler's suspension rippled through Ridgemont High School like a stone through still water. Without their leader, Tyler's crew fragmented. Cody and Brett seemed lost, unsure how to operate without Tyler's direction. Jason distanced himself entirely, clearly wanting no part of any continuing conflict. Students who had witnessed the parking lot incident told and retold the story, and in each retelling, Wesley's refusal to fight back became more heroic, a kind of moral victory that resonated more than any physical defeat of Tyler would have. Some students, ones who had ignored Wesley before, started nodding to him in hallways or offering small smiles. The invisible boy was becoming visible, but for the right reasons this time. Olivia found Wesley in the library 2 days after the incident, sitting at his usual table. She slid into the chair across from him, her face serious. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" "Yeah. Jaw's still sore, but nothing serious." "Cody feels terrible. He's been talking to me about everything, about how they treated you. He says he's sorry." She paused. "I know that doesn't undo anything, but I think he means it." Wesley did not know how to feel about that. Apologies were cheap after months of harassment, but Mr. Nakamura's words came back to him. Understanding that everyone carries their own pain did not excuse bad behavior, but it helped you not become what you hated. "Tell him I appreciate that," Wesley said, meaning it more than he expected. "Tyler's dad is apparently losing his mind about the suspension," Olivia continued. "There's talk that Tyler might be expelled if the hearing doesn't go well. The school board is taking it seriously because there's video evidence and everything." "I don't want him expelled," Wesley said, and he realized it was true. "I just wanted him to stop." Olivia looked at him with something like wonder. "You're a better person than me. I'd want him gone." But Wesley was starting to understand that true strength was not about destruction or revenge. It was about choosing the right outcome. about protecting rather than punishing, about knowing you could hurt someone and choosing not to. His father had tried to teach him that. Mr. Nakamura had refined it, and the parking lot incident had been his first real test. That afternoon, Wesley went to Mr. Nakamura's workshop for his regular training session. The old man was waiting, and when Wesley entered, Mr. Nakamura looked him over carefully, noting the bruising on Wesley's jaw. Wesley told him what had happened, the whole story from defending the freshman to taking Tyler's punch to the aftermath. When he finished, Mr. Nakamura was quiet for a long time. Finally, the old man said, "You chose well." In that moment, with anger and fear and pride all pushing you to strike back, you chose control. This is the lesson I have tried to teach, and you learned it better than I could have hoped. He bowed formally to Wesley, a gesture of respect that teacher gives to student who has surpassed expectation. Your father would be very proud. I am proud also. Wesley felt emotion welling up, but he pushed it down, bowing back. I learned from good teachers. Now comes harder part, Mr. Nakamura said. Defending yourself is easy when choice is clear, but what if choice is not clear? What if situation requires you to act, to use force, to protect yourself or others? Can you do that without losing the balance you have found? It was a good question, one Wesley did not have an answer for yet, but he suspected he was going to find out. Because Tyler's suspension was only 2 weeks, and when he returned, things would not simply go back to how they were before. Something had changed, some balance had shifted, and the universe was not finished with either of them yet. The disciplinary hearing took place the following week. Wesley was called to testify, along with Coach Morrison, Amy, and several other student witnesses, and security camera footage from the parking lot that captured everything in grainy detail. Tyler's father hired a lawyer who tried to spin the narrative as Wesley being a provocateur, citing the rumors about weapons and violence that had circulated earlier. But Drummond and the school board were thorough in their investigation, discovering the months of harassment that had preceded the parking lot incident. They interviewed other students who confirmed the pattern of bullying, including the peanut butter incident, which had been witnessed by dozens of cafeteria students. The board's decision was announced 3 days later. Tyler was suspended for the remainder of the semester, essentially 6 weeks, and would be on probation when he returned for senior year next fall. Any further incidents would result in immediate expulsion. Cody and Brett received formal warnings for their participation in the harassment campaign. It was not quite justice, but it was something, and Wesley felt a complicated sense of relief mixed with lingering unease. Tyler would be back eventually, and people like Tyler did not handle humiliation well. May arrived with warm weather and the end-of-year exhaustion that made everyone count down days to summer vacation. Wesley continued training with Mr. Nakamura, but their sessions had evolved. They spent less time on technique now and more on philosophy, on the mental and spiritual aspects of martial arts that were harder to quantify but no less important. They talked about fear and courage, about the difference between confidence and arrogance, about how strength without wisdom was just violence waiting to happen. When I was a young man, just come to America, Mr. Nakamura said one afternoon. I was very angry. Angry about internment camps, about prejudice, about father who died broken by country he loved. I learned fighting because I wanted to hurt those who hurt me. My teacher, Shimabukuro-sensei, he saw this in me. And one day he told me, anger is like holding hot coal. You are only one who gets burned. Mr. Nakamura smiled at the memory. I did not believe him then. I thought he was old and passive, but he was patient. He taught me anyway. And slowly, very slowly, I understood. Fighting skill is tool, can build or can destroy. Choice is in the heart of person holding tool. Wesley absorbed these lessons, applying them not just to martial arts but to his life at Ridgemont High. He helped the freshman he had defended, a kid named Marcus, ironically enough, with his homework and made sure he had someone to sit with at lunch. He talked to students he would have avoided before, expanding his social circle beyond just Olivia. He even had a brief, awkward conversation with Cody, who apologized formally and seemed to mean it, explaining that he had been caught up in Tyler's orbit and had made choices he regretted. Wesley accepted the apology without forgetting the history, maintaining appropriate boundaries. The school year was winding down when Tyler returned in early June for the last 2 weeks before final exams. His return was subdued. No fanfare, no clustering group of followers, just a quiet re-entry through the main doors on a Monday morning. Wesley saw him in the hallway before first period. Their eyes met for a moment, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement that what had happened had permanently altered their relationship. Tyler looked away first and kept walking, and Wesley felt a strange mix of emotions. Not quite victory, not quite sympathy, but something approaching understanding. They managed to avoid each other for a week. The school was large enough and their schedules different enough that it was possible if both parties wanted it, but the universe, or fate, or simple probability eventually put them in the same space at the same time. It was the last Friday of the school year, after final exams, when the usual structures had broken down and students were mostly hanging around killing time before summer break officially started. Wesley was in the gym helping to take down equipment for storage when Tyler walked in. They were alone, except for Coach Morrison's office, where the coach was presumably buried in paperwork. Tyler stopped when he saw Wesley. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Tyler said, "Can we talk?" Wesley set down the mat he was carrying. "Sure." They moved to the bleachers and sat with a few feet of space between them. Tyler looked different. Not physically, but there was something changed in his demeanor. He seemed smaller somehow, less certain. "I've been wanting to say this for a while," Tyler began. "I'm sorry. For everything. The stuff we did to you, the way I treated you, it was wrong." Wesley waited, not making it easy but not being cruel either. Tyler continued, "My dad has been on my ass about everything, about football, about college, about being a leader and living up to our family name. And I took all that pressure and I put it on other people, on you especially. You were just there, and you seemed like an easy target, and I—" He trailed off. "There's no excuse for it. I was an asshole." "Yeah, you were," Wesley said simply. Tyler flinched but nodded. "The suspension gave me a lot of time to think, and to deal with my dad's disappointment, which sucked, but mostly to think about why I did the things I did. And I realized I was everything I accused you of being. Weak, scared, trying to prove something I didn't actually have. You had every right to fight back in that parking lot. Everyone expected you to, and you didn't. That took more strength than anything I've ever done." Wesley considered his response carefully. "I'm not going to pretend it's all okay, and we're good now. You made my life hell for months. You made me dread coming to school every day. That doesn't just go away because you apologize." "I know. I don't expect us to be friends or anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm sorry." Tyler stood, preparing to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm going to therapy over the summer. My dad's making me, but I think I actually need it. So maybe next year I'll be less of a dick." "That would be good," Wesley said. "Not just for me. For everyone." Tyler nodded and walked away, and Wesley sat alone in the quiet gym, processing the conversation. It was not closure exactly, but it was something. An acknowledgement, a turning point, the end of one chapter and the beginning of whatever came next. He thought about what Mr. Nakamura had taught him, about balance and control, about choosing the right outcome rather than the satisfying one. He had won, not through violence, but through endurance, not through revenge, but through restraint. And that victory, strange and unsatisfying as it sometimes felt, was the kind that would last. The final day of school was anticlimactic in the way endings often are. Students signed yearbooks, exchanged social media information, made promises to stay in touch over the summer that most would not keep. Wesley found himself surrounded by more people than he expected, students who wanted to sign his yearbook or just say goodbye. Olivia gave him a hug and made him promise to text her over the summer. Marcus, the freshman he had defended, gave him an awkward handshake and a thank you that meant more than Wesley knew how to express. Even Coach Morrison stopped him in the hallway to say he had shown real character and that his father would have been proud. Wesley's last stop was Mr. Nakamura's workshop. The old man was cleaning and organizing for the summer break, tools being oiled and put away, mats rolled and stored. He smiled when Wesley entered. "Come to say goodbye?" Mr. Nakamura asked. "Just for the summer. I'll be back in the fall, if that's okay." "Is very okay. You have been good student. But more than that, you have been a good person. You learned that strength is not about defeating others, is about mastering yourself. This is the lesson that takes some people lifetime to learn, and you learned it in 1 year. I am very proud." They bowed to each other formally, teacher and student, two people connected by training and by shared understanding of what it meant to be strong without being cruel. Wesley left the workshop and walked through the quiet school one last time, past the lockers and the cafeteria and the gym, spaces that had been battlegrounds and were now just empty rooms waiting for next year's students and their dramas. At home that evening, Wesley and his mother had dinner together for the first time in weeks, both of them finally relaxed enough to actually talk. She told him about her work, about the difficult patients and the small victories. He told her about his training, about Mr. Nakamura's teachings, about how he had found something in himself he had not known was there. They talked about Thomas Hammond, about memories they shared, and for the first time since his death, those memories did not bring only pain. They brought gratitude for the time they had had and the lessons that remained. Later, alone in his room, Wesley stood at his window looking out at the summer night. Somewhere out there, Tyler was probably dealing with his own demons. Cody and the others were moving through their own journeys. Olivia was drawing in her sketchbook, creating worlds more beautiful than this one. And Wesley was here, transformed not by some dramatic final confrontation, but by the quiet accumulation of choices made day after day, moment by moment, to be better than what others expected and better than who he had been. He touched his father's dog tags, the metal warm from his body heat, and made a promise to the man who was gone but whose influence remained. He would continue to train, continue to grow, continue to be someone worthy of the lessons he had been taught. He would protect those who needed protecting, stand up when standing up was necessary, and always choose control over cruelty, because that was what strength really meant. Not the ability to hurt, but the wisdom to know when to use force and when to show mercy. Not the capacity for violence, but the discipline to reserve it for when all other options were exhausted. Summer stretched ahead of him, 3 months of possibilities, and beyond that was senior year and college, and a whole life still unwritten. Wesley did not know what challenges waited for him, what other Tyler Brennans the universe would put in his path, what tests his strength and character would face. But he knew who he was now. He was Wesley Hammond, son of Thomas Hammond, student of Hideo Nakamura, and he was strong in the ways that mattered. Not because he could fight, though he could, not because he was unafraid, because fear was natural and sometimes useful, but because he had learned the hardest lesson of all, That true power was knowing you could destroy someone and choosing instead to help them find their own way toward being better. The bruises on his jaw had faded to yellow and would be gone completely in another week. But the changes inside him, the fundamental reshaping of who he was and who he could become, those would last. He had walked through fire and emerged not burned, but refined, tempered like the steel of a well-made blade. And he was ready for whatever came next, not with arrogance or anger, but with the quiet confidence that came from truly knowing yourself. In the darkness of his room, Wesley moved through the forms one more time, the precise choreography of blocks and strikes and flowing movement that connected him to his father and his teacher and all the martial artists who had come before, people who had learned the same lessons and passed them down through generations: balance, control, strength without cruelty, justice without revenge. These were the principles he would carry forward, the foundation on which he would build whatever came next. And as he finished the final movement and returned to ready position, he smiled, genuinely and without reservation, because he knew with complete certainty that he had won the fight that mattered most, the one against his own fear and his own doubts and his own impulse to give up. He had become who he needed to be, and that achievement, invisible to everyone except those who really knew him, was worth more than any trophy or victory or moment of revenge could ever be. The story of Wesley Hammond at Ridgemont High School was ending, but the story of Wesley Hammond becoming the man he was meant to be was just beginning, and he could not wait to see where it would take him.